Welcome to Sanity, a podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host, Rebecca Sugar, we try to make sense out of the nonsense and bring a little bit of sanity to your week.
Ari, the quote of the week is by Joel Berry, the managing editor of the Babylon Bee, the wonderful satirical site that kind of got me through the COVID years. I didn't know this, that Joel had also served in the Marine Corps and was deployed to Iraq in 2006. And so I pulled this quote from an X post that he just put up, I think, yesterday. And it's not funny. Mm-hmm. It's quite serious, but I thought it really just spoke to me. He said, "Me and thousands of other young men stepped up to fight radical Islam in the Middle East on the claim that you fight them over there so we don't have to fight them over here. And while we fought overseas, while my brothers bled and died for that claim, our government was importing radical Muslims to Michigan, Texas, Missouri, thousands of radical mosques going up around the country, all preaching death to the country we love and fought for, the country my brothers died for, the country their wives gave up their husbands for. And now we have to fight them over here too. I don't think people realize how betrayed we feel, how enraged we are." So, I just bring that up because that lesson, I think, could be applied to a lot of subjects in politics and in society today. There are a lot of people angry about a lot of things, but this particular issue of what's happening with Muslim populations around the United States has been coming up a lot more. A lot of people are talking about it, and it's not Islamophobia. It's sort of a version of Islamo-reality, where people are looking at Dearborn, Michigan, and Minneapolis, and Dallas, Texas, and asking questions about populations that weren't here just a few years ago are here now, and though they are nationally small percentage-wise in terms of their numbers, where they have a significant presence have been, creating controversy. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's worth paying attention to this growing sentiment and how we're going to contend with it going forward.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And we're going to spend some time on this week's episode, I think, paying attention to how this is actually playing out in different states on the level of policy and lawmaking and all of that. So we'll have maybe a little bit of a different show in that way, and that we're going to kind of travel across the continental U.S. To look at some of these issues. But we'll start right here in New York with the mutual decision of Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani to keep on Jessica Tisch as police commissioner, and her decision to accept that and to stay. And we'll kind of get into that as a way maybe of reporting out how this administration in gestation is coming together. And as I mentioned, we're going to take a look at some issues in Texas and North Carolina having to do with immigration, as well as this issue around Muslim Brotherhood and care in Texas. And then we'll, don't worry, we're going to get you some of your Jeffrey Epstein latest news. We'll catch you up all on that. So a little bit of a grab bag show this week, which I think is a fun thing. We'll also talk, I think, about the visit of Mohammed bin Salman to the White House, which was quite extraordinary.
To alert everybody to our Sunday interview show with Dr. Sabine Hazan, and we're going to be talking about ivermectin and her work on the microbiome, and specifically some of the work she did with ivermectin during the COVID years having to do with the microbiome. It's a really fascinating conversation, so everyone should tune in on Sunday.
Yeah. You get everything here on Saturday. You get everything from soup to nuts.
No sports and,
I'm happy
and
to
no
do
economy.
Right, exactly.
The two things that like my husband cares the most about.
Right. So the decision of Jessica Tisch to stay, this had become kind of one of these bellwether questions of like, is there an adult in the room? It always struck me as a little bit of a bizarre kind of thing. I mean, is personnel to a certain extent is policy for sure. On the other hand, how is this going to work? Many mayor police commissioner relationships have ended unhappily because of the political nature, really of both roles. So what do you make of this, Rebecca? Were you encouraged, or do you think this is kind of maybe a distraction from some of the real?
I mean, all the talk
issues
between me and my friends is, how long is this going to last? Is it 3 months, 6 months? Nobody imagines that this is a marriage made in heaven, and that it will last forever. The question really is why? Why for both of them? And you could imagine interests that they both have, right? Mamdani has an interest in making sure the city doesn't actually fall apart in the first 3 to 6 months of his term. And he has a broader interest also in making sure that that doesn't happen, so that nationally Democrats and Democratic Socialists, win. So keeping in a strong police commissioner helps with that. But you have to ask what kind of horse trading went on to make sure that she would stay. There were certain things that she couldn't live with, and certain things that he can't live with long term. So I guess at the end of the day, nobody expects this to be a long-term solution. I did look up some of the Democratic Socialists of America websites and X sites, and what they are saying about this is, of course, not positive.
They're outraged.
Very outraged that the Zionist billionaire who used the brutal police to disrupt the pro-Palestinian mobs at universities and on our city streets is being retained by their hero, Zoran Mamdani. So it's a bad look for him in their eyes, although I'm not so sure that that's an authentic response or just what they have to say now to allow him to keep her for the time being so that it serves his interests. So there's a lot of game playing here. We don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I'm happy that she's there. We do need an adult in the room. But as someone who lives in Manhattan, I don't really think of this as a saving grace long term for me, and my hopes of not getting knocked over the head when I'm walking down the street.
Right. I mean, I think one thing to say is it's definitely true, and I'm not a statistician, but since her appointment, I do think things have taken a turn for better. At least seems like there's an adult in the room. The previous Adams administration police commissioners were like, it was hard to even keep track of them. They kind of rotated out corruption, other things. Yeah. So, I think she's definitely a really good public servant. I think the extent to which there was pressure on Mamdani to keep her tells you all you have to know about, where New Yorkers are in terms of public safety, or where many of them are in terms of public safety. I worry a little bit about, the first incident, shooting, whatever. I mean, this is going to become a flashpoint.
Yes.
And there will be that kind of event. I don't, it's so just to say that, as you mentioned it, we're on thin ice here.
Yeah. Although remember, Bill de Blasio hired Bratton, it was a similar sort of relationship. They agreed on nothing. They did not have the same worldview, but de Blasio calculated that he needed someone strong to run the police department. And he lasted a good 2 years. So we might have a 2-year window here where we can walk freely in the streets.
Right. I mean, I think Mamdani is nothing if not savvy, and I think there's a sense of he is taking a hit on his left flank for this, but he's also cementing and reassuring a lot of folks on the center who would otherwise be very critical. So it's horse trading, it's political bargaining, absolutely. You're seeing this in his discouraging of Kiasi, campaign against Hakeem Jeffries. I think he went to the DSA meeting. Yeah. But make no mistake, I mean, the DSA is virulently anti-police. Yeah. Its policies are enormously radical, and they are not only at the table, they are kind of, a big part of this administration.
Right.
And that hasn't changed.
And it's Mamdani, right? Like you're saying DSA as though it's like some separate thing to him. Like, you don't mean it that way, but to say totally. That is him. And I think it's also, going to be interesting to see the meeting between Mamdani and President Trump tomorrow at the White House. And I wonder if he's going there to beg Trump not to send the National Guard in or something. Like, look, I have Jessica Tisch. Don't send the Guard. But I'm dying to hear that. That's going to be must-see TV.
Yeah. Or even just the visuals of it, right? How is that interaction going to look?
Right. Is it the Zelensky meeting?
Right.
Or is it, wear a suit. Zoran.
Well, he always wears a suit. He always wears that, kind of
Fair enough.
ill-fitting suit. But I'm interested in that meeting too. I think both have been sort of playing nice a little bit. Trump said, we want New York to do well. Mamdani says, I'm willing to meet with anyone about affordability. But it's still pretty remarkable given the rhetoric of the campaign and his victory speech, which was directly confrontational. Well,
didn't Trump announce that he's meeting with that communist Zoran Mamdani?
Communist mayor in New York City.
Little dig there, yeah.
I mean, I think, we're trying to do some reporting on, who are the people Mamdani is bringing in, what is their overall character. And it'll be interesting to see on this question of personnel, it being policy, when we start to see a real shift in terms of political orientation.
Well, I mean, it's early days, but so far so bad, right? I mean, the 34-year-old woman, right, who got here last year. I mean, the list already isn't great. So
I also will say that just in terms of a tip for folks kind of watching at home, we basically haven't had a mayor for years. Now, in ways that are probably not great, but also maybe we're sort of like, beneficial neglect in a way. I mean, do no harm. I mean, Adams basically has been checked out for years. I mean, since his criminal trials, and then he's, been traveling abroad and all that. So just to say, having a mayor who is engaged, who is hands-on, and who really sees this as an ideological project, I think is going to feel different for New Yorkers.
Yeah, in a very not good way.
It's like when your parents come home, after they've been away,
or like when the government shuts down. And certain people felt it, but most people didn't until they did. Sometimes not having government around is better for everyone.
Except you have to make a flight
until then, right?
So we're gonna see all of that, and we'll be talking about Mamdani all the time. I mean, it's a local story, but it's also,
I think you said this in one of our, before he won, it's just nobody wanted him to win, but if he does, it's going to definitely provide a lot of talking points for us on this show and
I will say, I mean, one thing that is interesting with the Tisch, just to circle back to its story, is that New York does have this tradition of sort of like the police commissioner is the second most visible person after the mayor. And so they almost have their own political power center. It'd be interesting to think of what that would look like at a national level, like having not a unity government exactly, but, I don't know, to see. I mean, it was a little bit that way in Trump's first term where people were like, oh, we want this person there, that person there, or Obama keeping Bob Gates as Secretary of Defense, and we would want public servants to serve the public despite political difference. The question becomes, when are you just a fig leaf, right, for an administration that is intensely ideological and extreme?
Absolutely. It's a big question that Jessica Tisch is not going to answer publicly, but a lot of people are asking. And worse than that, is she going to do what we said in the beginning, which is keep things calm and reasonable in this city such that in the midterms people find it much more palatable to vote for a Democratic socialist because, look, they're not as bad as they seemed, right? That's the fig leaf you're talking about. It's a very real concern, and I'm sure she factored that into her thinking. But it's not clear to me that the benefits will outweigh the negatives here. I mean, certainly for New York, just living here selfishly, you'd want her in. But if you don't want to see the growth of this TSA, I wonder if it was a wise decision for her to stay. Better to let them fall on their own sword.
Right. I mean, you imagine the meetings with kind of Mamdani, Alvin Bragg, and Jessica Tisch, and you wonder what those dynamics
and Jamal Bowman and all the cast of characters that are going to be in this government. I mean,
well, that's another would be a red flag. I think watching where Bowman is. I mean, he's a true clown.
As opposed to Alvin Bragg, who isn't. I mean,
no, for sure. But the more these kinds of people get posted. I mean, there was some talk of Bowman being like school's chancellor. I mean, can you imagine? Just appalling.
Yeah, if you're a public school mom right now, get your kids out.
Okay, so why don't we talk about some of those state issues we mentioned in the opening. We had Texas banning or adding care in the Muslim Brotherhood to kind of a terrorist list. I think pretty uncontroversially, I'd say for the Muslim Brotherhood, CARE, I think for many of us is just a nefarious act, or a kind of, speaking of a fig leaf, a real fig leaf, or a kind of laundromat where the ugliest kind of Islamisms get kind of made presentable, and then have a kind of link to the Democratic Party and link to the left more generally. But they're the identity of them as a neutral broker, I think, is one of the more pernicious facts of kind of American civic life. Yeah,
remember the Biden administration invited them to the table to work on the plan to combat anti-Semitism, right? Talk about washing, bad behavior in Islamism, but to actually have them try to sit at the table to defeat the problem that they promote, it was ridiculous. But that's the power of CARE. They've become a real force in American politics. And so good on Governor Abbott for finally saying what everyone else knew to be true. And CARE is threatening to sue them. And Abbott is threatening to enjoy that because he'll have discovery and be able to show the world what this organization is really about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think of this as a new front in kind of religious liberty. You could see some of these cases eventually going to the Supreme Court, and sort of where you draw that line between religious liberty and national security becomes sort of intriguing. I mean, one thing to watch, back to Mamdani on this question, is he's talked about eliminating a lot of the sort of surveillance structures that were put in place after 9/11, and totally makes sense why people feel conflicted about that, and there were infringements on personal liberties, but kind of some of the counterterrorism measures, plainclothes officers in mosques, informants, kind of, I think there's a lot of action that could happen around that.
Well, also that his interest is only to remedy what he calls over hyper surveillance in one community, his own, the Muslim community. So if he had some principle that he was adhering to, he would apply it to everyone. But of course, he applies it only to the people he wants to protect the most. And in Texas, just to say also that another thing that Governor Abbott is talking about is banning Sharia law. There are certain Sharia courts that are already operational in Texas, and Chip Roy, who I'm begging to come on our show, has put forward legislation to this effect. That really is going to be that question of religious liberty versus national security, although it's clearly not that, but that will be what is used to try to defend it. But this is really about having two systems of justice in one country, which is an impossibility and just bad for everyone.
Yeah, I was kind of interested in the story out of CUNY this week, where you had like this interfaith event that degenerated into this wild kind of anti-Semitic free-for-all, where the imam, or basically was led a walkout for participating with Zionists. So a lot of the structures, I think, that even someone my age grew up with around diversity, around interfaith, around mutual understanding. I mean, I remember in college, this was like a fetish, and sponsored by Hillel, and it was seen as sort of a real point of pride. And I think a lot of that, not to say there aren't those connections in different ways, but a lot of that has now really fallen apart.
Yeah, I think this idea that diversity is our strength has been challenged, and rightly so. I think that's just a meme, and it's not really true. It's not human nature either. And the Founding Fathers, I was sort of digging into some of the early conversations about immigration and who should come here and who shouldn't. And there was a lot of discussion and in the most common sense way about being liberal in our immigration policies, but having certain standards, right? People had to actually like the country that they were coming to. They had to actually have some sense of contributing to it. They had to speak English, many people advocated for. We've abandoned all of these principles, and we've just decided that immigration is about what's best for the immigrant and not what's best for the country to which they are immigrating. And that's that diversity sort of fetish, the twisting of what it means to have the privilege to come to this incredible country and be a part of it, which we want to extend to as many good people as possible. And we want to decline that invitation to as many bad people as possible. It just seems obvious. And maybe back to Joel Berry's comment, which is, right, if I'm going to go over there and fight the mess over there, don't import it here. right? This is a country that deserves people who want to be good to the country.
Yeah, we ran an editorial about this vote at the Oxford Union last week, saying that Israel is a bigger threat to peace than Iran.
Yeah.
And there was this incredible image of that and of that vote or in the Oxford Union, and all these people holding up red hands, which of course is an allusion to the lynching of Israeli soldiers in Ramallah years ago, but really horrific acts of violence, and just a kind of moral inversion. You talked about kind of values and sort of orientation. And
imagine being the kinds of people who would use that symbol, even if you felt deep down that those young men, those IDF soldiers who were lynched in Ramallah deserved it because they were occupiers, that you would enjoy putting faux blood on your hands and sort of reveling in the bloodlust, indicates that you're the kind of person I want anywhere near me. Go back wherever you came from. I don't say that in that sort of phobic way. I say it in just a very practical way. I don't want Americans feeling that way either. Like there's something about vetting for just basic decency that we just don't even think we are entitled to do anymore. It's really harming the country, and it's boiling over. There is outrage. It's online mostly is where I see it, obviously, which isn't always real. But to the extent that it is real, it's being ignored, and it's being labeled as phobic, Islamophobic, transphobic, whatever the phobia of the day is. And it's a big miss, and then it will boil over, and everyone will say, well, where did that come from?
And this is the big lesson is that of global politics over the last 10, 15 years is that immigration is a defining issue, and that if whoever doesn't address it, people will turn to the alternative. Right? It's driving outcomes. It's driving regime changes. It's driving paradigm shifts, and we're seeing that obviously in Europe and here as well.
Changing the nature of our actual cities. So maybe we should talk just for a minute about North Carolina and this Charlotte's Web operation that ICE conducted there, and they arrested hundreds. And what I noticed, what a lot of people noticed, is the empty classrooms, the empty construction sites. To some degree, that was about people literally who are illegal, who populate these places and are staying home. And to some degree, there were people who feared that if they looked like the people that ICE was targeting, they might be taken away. And so either way, the visual tells us that large swaths of large American cities, or at least important American cities. I mean, Charlotte's not huge, but it's a well-known American city, and it is affected to that degree by ICE entering the city. That means that we have a lot of people here, and we don't know who they are.
We might disagree a little on this, and I might disagree with myself. I'm still sort of thinking it out. To step back, it was obvious that the Democrats totally not only capitulated on the border, but basically had an open border policy, no question, and that undid Biden. And Democrats still don't have a good answer on the border. And it was an act of political stupidity and policy malpractice. So then we go to Trump. I think most Americans are supportive of the closing of the southern border because of the reality of what that open door policy looked like and the damage it's wrought and will continue to inflict. The question is, with these raids, I think a lot of people, maybe the squeamish people, are getting kind of nervous about this. I mean, a lot of these raids were on laundromats, on bakeries. I mean, is this really? Yes, there were criminals who were arrested. There are also a lot of people who aren't criminals. And so is this sustainable? Is this, how do we think about this in a broader context? How do we think about this going forward? I don't think people want people at their bakery being ripped away while they're making a muffin and thrown in the back of a van.
Nobody wants it when they're standing next to that person or know that person who's been baking their bread every morning for years. But polling nationally does indicate that most Americans want not just criminal illegals to be deported, but all people who are illegal to be deported. And so,
but when you drill down, and I think there's a lot of noise around. It's a complicated question. I mean, do people, what kind of, and maybe in theory, but
right. So the question is, there are two questions. The question is this dividing line between criminal illegal immigrants and illegal immigrants and who should be deported. And some people fall on one side of that and some people fall on the other.
Right.
Then there's the question that you raise of how it should be done. Sort of strikes me as the same question we used to ask about the critics of Israel, who, you've been put in this terrible position. It should never have happened. What else can you do? I sort of ask the same question here. What else could ICE do? What else could a government do to extract criminal, let's say if you're only going after the criminal illegal aliens, who are being protected by governors and by states? There was, by the way, in North Carolina, there was a huge meeting in a church. An NGO took over and was teaching citizens how to interrupt ICE, activity. We've of course seen violence against ICE. How would you extract criminal illegal aliens when large swaths of the country and an entire political party are defending them? Mm-hmm. If you don't do these raids, what other way would one suggest that happen?
Yeah. I think the broader question of, and I'd like to see some numbers and we can, how many people are criminals here? I think there's, again, going to sending people to a Home Depot, when people are gathering just to work is, I don't know. At a certain point, they're just diminishing human returns and diminishing policy returns. I think if you want to address immigration in a long-term way, you have to have policy. I think there should be a pathway for law-abiding people to some kind of accommodation here.
How many? 10 million,
well,
20 million? And what about the whole Bacha Ungar Sargon argument, which is, we have all this sympathy for the immigrants who we want to allow to stay here because they've been here for years working and contributing. What about the sympathy for the average American worker whose job was taken by that person, or who, in the case of criminal illegal aliens, child was raped by one of them? The sympathies aren't always... there have to be human sympathies for everyone,
sure.
And there have to be, from a policy point of view, from a government point of view, the sympathies have to at least be triaged and first apply to American citizens. The question isn't what's best for these immigrants. The question is what's best for America and American citizens. Mm-hmm. Then, moving from that place, what's best for the people we've imported who don't belong here.
You read about Charlotte, whole streets or stores are closed because they're worried about their workers being kidnapped.
Right.
Is that good for those shop
I don't know,
owners?
But is that real, or is that the media telling them that everybody with brown skin is being kidnapped off the street? I don't believe that that's true either. I'm sure that there have been mistakes and people who've fallen into a net that they should.
I get that.
But I don't believe. ICE, by the way, is using Palantir technology and geolocating to go after specific people.
Right.
Other people may be getting caught.
If there is that ability, then I think that's great. The more obviously targeted you could be, the better. My point is less that, us cast aspersions on what ICE is doing on a human level, and more to say it's not clear to me where the broader economic advantages rest here. Is that true? Is it for every illegal immigrant? Your American is getting that job. Is it?
Or the wages
beneficial?
are going down.
I don't know.
Right, but how do we not know? Meaning that's the problem. We haven't asked the question, what's best for America, and then worked backwards from there. We've just
I think most people
imported people and saying we don't even know the impacts.
Immigration reasonably done is a net good. I think that's.
I agree with that statement.
Right?
Of course.
It has been throughout history, right?
Of course. But that's not the state we're in. We're in a state where immigration was not only not reasonably done, it was deliberately and horrifically done. Mm-hmm. And there'll be innocent people swept up in that. But the primary concern of a country has to be its own people first, not exclusively, but first. And I don't see a lot of that coming out in these conversations. And we should know what the economic impacts are and the human impacts are and the impacts to the job market.
Trump said last week, we don't have the skilled people to do this stuff. That's right. So I don't know. Is that true? Is it not true?
What an amazing thing to say. And he took a lot of heat from his own base for that. A terrible sort of slight against American workers.
Yeah.
But the fact that these are all questions that have yet to be answered, I don't know. Probably because nobody wanted to answer them because there's too much money to be made in illegal immigration on both sides of the aisle. But here we are at this moment, and these raids are happening, and I don't know. The idea that that this is the wrong way to go is
yeah. I hear you. I think I'm not one of these. I mean, I see this on social media. People who see ICE as like the Gestapo. I'm not advocating that. I'm just trying to drill down into sort of, on the one hand, the human cost or element. On the other hand, the policy cost. Where the two meet. I mean, is it a red herring to say, the guy, I don't want the guy who makes my bagel and came here 17 years ago taken away. Maybe it is. Maybe you could say, all right, you can't think that way, because if you thought that way, no policy would ever happen. They're always, but I think especially when you have, this question that does live in an intimate neighborhood way, to your point of like how implicated all of this is, it's tough.
It's tough, which is why I'm glad I'm not the person in charge of the policy, because always, like the parent of a household, you always have to do the hard thing and the thing that makes people recoil if it's best for the people in your family. And I think in some cases, the harshest reality might be the best. And I kind of like the idea of deportations of, good, hardworking illegal immigrants with a quick and clear pathway to return. With some penalties, right? You can't just break the law and just get a pardon, right? On a mass scale, how are we going to build a policy off of that going forward? But if there's some clear sense of you broke the law, you're going to be punished, but you're a productive member of society and we're going to create this meaningful path for you to re-enter, I think is one, it may not be practical, but it's a fair idea. But again, I don't know the answers. I just know that America's interests have to be top of mind when creating these policies, not what's best for people who came here illegally, no matter how kind and decent and good. That should factor in, but not first.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What's your sunlight this week, Rebecca?
Oh, well, my sunlight is the recent Nick Fuentes video that he just released. There's so many of his videos to talk about that are controversial, but he did this whole conversation about how progressive Democrats and nationalist Republicans should join together, actually, and create this almost new party in America. So his suggestion was that the far left give up on their open borders ideas and their anti-white agenda.
And just to say on that, and to link to our previous conversation, I mean, for a long time, the hard left was anti-immigration because of this the kind of worker and socioeconomic. So you look at Bernie back in the day, it was actually for a very hard immigration
Almost
policy.
Every Democrat, So Nick Fuentes is suggesting that the left give up on open borders and its anti-white identity politics agenda. He's suggesting that the right give up on, that's a good point, give up on its free market and foreign aid agenda, and maybe provide some subsidies for education and, the sort of more social policies be a little softer on, and that if that happened, those two sides could join together and form a group that he feels would win elections for the next 100 years. It's not an entirely crazy thought, and it sort of seems to be what actually is slowly happening, this horseshoe effect of the far left and the far right finding common cause and coming together. But I just think it's important not to get sucked into the romance of such an idea by such a crazy person, but to point out that what he's really advocating for is a nationalist kind of party with this shared ethnic identity built
National socialism.
Built on economic grievance. And where have we heard that before? Right. So just try to remember always, I think we all have to remember that when Nick Fuentes says anything, I think we should all remember who's speaking and not take it terribly seriously. But I think we should take seriously, actually, the motivation for him, the reasons why he feels this is a good idea, because I think millions of young men in this country also feel like those policies would be a good package. And a lot of the things that we've done have driven them to that idea. But identifying problems and finding solutions is not the same thing. And what he's going to lead us toward is this Nazi-like ideology that took down the entire world, 70, 80 years ago.
Yeah, it's a good point just to say that political parties and coalitions and alliances do change. I mean, to a large extent, Trump remade the Republican Party. I mean, on core issues, tariffs, government intervention in a way, foreign policy, so these parties are not inevitable or monolithic.
Yes.
They really change, and
Yes.
they change form. And look at the Democrats. Look at a Democratic Socialist winning in New York.
Yeah.
So I think where these parties are and how their kind of agenda could change really, really rapidly.
Yeah. And what scares me about it, Ari, is like, look, at the end of the day, we can all come up with a lot of really good reasons why the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have shifted, because in so many ways they've failed most Americans in the last 50 years. But just voting for something else, something different, is not the answer either, right? We have to think about what we're changing toward, wanting to become. And people like Nick Fuentes are not that interested in that question. They're only interested in criticizing what is, not figuring out what to build. Same with Zoran Mamdani. Lots of ability to point out problems. Some of them I might even agree with. Zero ability to figure out how to make that better, and will then likely end up making it worse.
Yeah. My sunlight is Representative Clay Higgins, who was the lone vote against releasing the Epstein Files. And I don't know if I agree with him entirely. I thought, though, it was a valuable perspective. I mean, anytime you have something 427-1, unanimous in the Senate, I think standing up for your belief takes guts. And
you like a good contrarian.
I like a contrarian. And what he said was, I worry about, this sort of presumption of innocence. I worry about what this is going to do to people's reputations. And I have to say, I do too. Take Larry Summers. You don't have to love Larry. You don't have to be the biggest fan. Yeah. But, he was texting Epstein about, an affair or alleged affair. It's not a crime. And it's not clear to me why that is a public matter. Who I wouldn't want my text messages revealed. I think it's a huge breach of privacy for someone to get swept up. And now you could say, Ari, listen, he knew who Epstein was. He knew what his deal was. He's texting him. But there's been no hint that Summers is charged with a crime. And his life has entirely been, it's like a Me Too kind of thing. I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, I really sympathize with people. Privacy matters, and we've abandoned it in most precincts in America, and I don't want people exposed for just bad behavior, because I don't want my bad behavior exposed, or yours, or anyone else's. We all have bad behavior, and I think it's wrong. I'm curious, though, like, legally, if the government conducts an investigation, as it has, and has a file, doesn't that belong to the people? Like, on what grounds can they deny it to the people legally? Only if it is, threatens national security, or there is a current ongoing investigation. But otherwise, do they even have the right to deny it?
What do you mean?
To Americans?
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, isn't that public? Isn't that our information? Our government conducted an investigation on a sex trafficking ring, and using taxpayer dollars. Isn't it, in some sense, doesn't that information belong to the people? And can't they only deny it to us under very certain circumstances? Can the government just do things and then deny information to Americans?
Well, you can have things like freedom of information requests, but especially with, the DOJ, I mean, I think the burden, especially if it's contains private or sensitive information, I mean,
so that's what redactions are for.
There has,
right?
I know, but this is why they passed a law ordering the DOJ to release it. I don't know how they're going to choose what to release. I mean, there are some exceptions you mentioned for ongoing investigations or this or that. I think Trump appointing the DOJ to only prosecute Democrats is like ridiculous. A little ridiculous and a little rich.
Here's what I'm getting at. I don't understand, in all this time that they've had these files, and sensing that this day was going to come where they would have to release them just because of public pressure, and I have some sense that they don't have the right not to release them, but I may be wrong. Why haven't they just redact the Larry Summers made ugly comments to people's stuff? Because that's not in the public interest. It doesn't matter. And just show us who the guys are who slept with 14-year-olds. Because that's really what matters in this.
It's not clear.
Why is that so hard to get to?
Maybe there is that information.
Then just show us that.
Maybe it will be released.
Show us that it doesn't exist. It just feels to me
very selective. I mean, when all this was coming out, like the news, it was reporting that like Matt Gaetz had like paid a 17-year-old to have sex with him. So I don't know. I'm just a little bit. I think everyone is using this for. I don't know. I mean, so
this doesn't seem more complicated than it needs to be. If there either are a group of men, lots of men, 5 men who slept with 14-year-olds, organized by Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
Show us the documents that show who those people are, and and remove Larry Summers' name and all the people who just went on flights and tickled girls or whatever happened, because that's not our business and it doesn't help anybody. Why is that so hard to do? Why is it taking this long to do that?
I don't even know why. I mean, obviously the texts with Epstein and Summers were part of, they gained access to Epstein's phone as part of the investigation, right? Yep. So, but the thing would be, like, the government can collect information, but if it doesn't bring charges, you can say maybe the public has a right to that. But there's also, what about Summers' right to privacy? I mean, why, if it's not evidence in court, it's not being used by a defendant, I don't see why this stuff is being released.
I don't think that we have to see that. I just want to see who committed the crimes, and I can't understand. It feels like all this obfuscating is designed to make us think that this whole thing is so complicated so that they don't have to release the names of the people who actually committed the crimes, because those people are donors to both Democrats and Republicans, and they don't want to compromise those relationships. It just feels like the obvious answer.
Yeah. So that's the question. Will we see more, because I mean, the Summer stuff he was asking him romance advice. I mean, it was a little distasteful, but again, like, I don't know, to see Summers like begging forgiveness from the students.
That was so sad, wasn't it?
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I
bring himself that
this,
low.
Auto da fe of, like, so maybe we'll see more of that. Maybe we'll see more serious stuff. I don't know. But
I can't believe it's a maybe, is what I'm saying. Like, just show us the serious stuff. Period. Show us that.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about empathy. The idea of your text messages being released, I mean, out of context, is just really chilling to me.
Yeah, agreed.
And I get the optics. Epstein was arrested the next day. It doesn't look great that Summers was, and yeah, I mean, it probably wasn't the best idea in retrospect to keep up a clearly close friendship with someone, given that Epstein already had been convicted of sex crimes.
You know what it makes me think of? Like the Glenn Greenwald tape that came out, his sex tape where he was dressed like a housemaid or something and licking the legs of some man. And, at the end of the day, it's his choice. He's a consenting adult. All the things that he said in his defense, although he doesn't need a defense, like, he's allowed to do whatever he wants in the privacy of his own home. And it was terrible that it was released. And then the minute you see it, you can't stop thinking about it and judging it and factoring it into everything he says from that day forward, as I do, admittedly, even though I listen to his podcast all the time. And I would always disagree with half of what he said and agree with half of what he said. And now it's the same 50-50 split, but I see him in a skirt and fishnets. And
I don't wish that on anybody.
It's a bad place, my head. So Larry Summers is now just, it doesn't matter. He could be the same man doing the same things, whether you like what he does or doesn't like what he does. Well, you just see him going to Jeffrey Epstein and making silly jokes about girls, and you can't unsee it. And that's your point.
What I hate about it too is, like, it's an excuse for people who have always hated him, basically the left and the far left, to claim another scalp. And it feels like a lot of these things are going to be that way. They're going to give ammunition to people's enemies already to, boot them from public life.
But let's just say we both would probably agree, we do need the scalps of the men who were raping girls. Like, we just do. That's a thing. If it happened, and if there's a list of such people, I'd like to see it.
Don't you think those people would have been prosecuted if
I don't
there
know.
was that
Not
evidence?
if they're big donors, maybe. I mean, maybe I'm just being tinfoil about it, but just so then these questions are out there, now show us.
Then there's going, and I guess if their statute of limitations hasn't been passed, then there's going to be pressure to prosecute those people. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of,
and there'll be pressure on Pam Bondi to ask why she hasn't prosecuted them. So everyone has an interest in maybe not telling us, or maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe it was just Jeffrey Epstein. But again, I go back to the question I asked like a while ago on this podcast. If it was just Jeffrey Epstein and there was no one else to prosecute, why is Ghislaine Maxwell in jail? Who did she traffic for?
In a very plush, situation.
Right.
I mean, why is she getting the Lux treatment? I don't know.
Were we going to talk quickly about the video before we do sunburns?
Yes.
The Dem video, or you have anything to say about it?
No, I don't have much to say, but you go ahead.
Okay, we don't have to belabor it, but several Democrats, including some high-profile ones like Senator Mark Kelly and Elise Stefanik, came out.
Or Alyssa Slotnick.
Alyssa Slotnick. I knew that sounded wrong. Sorry, Elise. Alyssa Slotnick came out and posted a video, sort of like a PSA for all of their military and intelligence friends out there that, guess what, you don't have to and you must not obey any illegal orders issued by your agencies or the president. And it was a well done video, actually. It was like a real PSA. And there was a lot of conversation online about, is this sedition? Are they advocating for people to overthrow the government, and should they be charged with sedition? So it's important just to note that they did say that military officers and intelligence officers should not obey illegal orders, right? Which and that's not incitement to overthrow government, because technically that is what you are not supposed to do in those positions. But of course, the intent of the whole thing was to just plant the seed in people's head that whether it's ICE raids or whatever else bothers them about this president, that he's trying to push people to commit illegal acts, and it's their sort of moral responsibility, again, to save democracy, the most overused phrase in America, to fight back against that. And it was just a silly show, and
a little weird.
I don't know. They have nothing better to do. They might not, because the Democratic Party doesn't really have a way forward. So their way forward is just constantly to show that they're fighting Donald Trump. But I think it's just worth pointing out to people, calm down. They're not going to be prosecuted for sedition.
Yeah.
Okay, your sunburn.
Okay, so mine was the call it riot protest at Park East Synagogue last night.
Here in New York.
And there were kind of violent protesters, hateful protesters blocking the door. It was an event was being organized by Nefesh B'Nefesh, which helps people interested in moving to Israel. Some of the chants were globalize the Intifada revolution, death to the IDF. What bothers me is the shift of protest. Again, that's a kind word for. I think we have to come up with a better word: intimidation, or to synagogues. Yeah. This is something we've seen in Europe, and it seems to me to mark a clear shift. And when I worry about, what are trends that could accelerate in the kind of Mamdani administration, I think this is one of the things we're going to see. I think over time, the line between Zionist and Jew, the sense of Jewish targets, Jewish schools, Jewish institutions as legitimate targets of vandalism and worse is going to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a kind of Rubicon there of crossing, of going from protesting generally, or even protesting, an embassy or something, to these softer targets. I don't know why the NYPD didn't create a more robust perimeter and push that back. But it was scary. The video was scary, and you don't want to exaggerate, but the way in which, and I think it comes from the top. I think Mamdani's antagonism towards Zionism, I think his real sustained assault on the idea of the safety of Zionist Jews, which are like 95% or whatever, is giving a permission slip, as the left would say, a permission structure for this kind of nastiness.
Also interesting to that point, one of Mamdani's, one of the things on his wish list for the police department is to get rid of this emergency response group, I think it's called, which is the group that would go to these protests in advance, really, and try to kind of make sure that they didn't get to Mach 10. Mm-hmm. And they are, on the left viewed as sort of like Nazi squads of, brown shirts coming in beating the innocent. So I'm worried that if he is successful in getting rid of that department and the police department, then these soft targets will be even more vulnerable going forward. And again, like this happened at a synagogue, and the Jewish community is in particular, obviously, the focal point of these pro-Palestinian, pro-Islamist, anti-Israel, anti-Western groups. But make no mistake that just like the Christmas markets in Germany and France, which we covered last week, are being attacked, those soft targets will also feel the heat. If it's known that there isn't a robust police
you're going to
presence.
See a big protest at the tree at Rockefeller Center.
Yeah. Okay, my sunburn is just what's been happening in Minnesota. Chris Rufo at the Manhattan Institute has done really great reporting on this. And there's been fraud at an incredible scale there. There's a lot of reporting already about the housing fraud that took place, and there have been indictments there where members of the Somali population, they're the immigrant population, were conducting mass fraud and, sort of setting up fake companies and overbilling and to the tune of, $100 million. But what's now also come out, it's just sort of eye-crossing that people who came here en masse are like defrauding the system that welcomed them in. There are child food programs that have been raided effectively, and the money is being used as kickbacks and sent to Somalia. There was a huge ballooning of the budget in autism services. This in particular just struck me as unbelievable. The claims for autism services were $3 million in 2018 in Minneapolis, and they ballooned to $399 million in 2023. That's really mothers falsely labeling their children as autistic when they are not, and then sucking money from the state, some of which they just kept for themselves and gave as kickbacks to the doctors who were signing those false declarations of autism. But what's really horrific on top of all that is that these remittances that went back to Somalia, a certain percentage was going to Al-Shabaab, which is one of the largest terrorist organizations in Somalia. And Chris Rufo points out that the Minneapolis taxpayer may well be one of the largest funders of the Al-Shabaab terrorist organization in Somalia because of this network of fraud. And so there have been certain indictments, as I said, and there'll be more. But I think this is a broader problem. It's community-wide. It's not to implicate every single Somali immigrant, but it's to say it's not just some small niche group that was doing this. And again, back to our beginning quote from Joel Berry, if you don't want an ugly reaction on the other side, we have to contend with these issues and think about who, how, why, when, how many immigrants we're bringing into this country, and what standards we're setting for their participation in our society, which we want, but not like this.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. See you next week.
See ya.